In 1969 in California, a desperate couple knocks on Miss Dina's door begging her to help their son Juan. He's been haunted by menacing voices since he stole a silver necklace from a group of Romani travelers. Dina starts to perform some kind of counter-curse ritual, but all of a sudden, the doors go flying into the room. An invisible force throws the boy over a balcony, and then the floor begins to shatter. Cuidado! Juan is grabbed by a monstrous claw and pulled into the hole before it's closed. With a livid expression, Dina swears to find that demon and avenge Juan. Decades later, we meet Christine Brown, a dedicated employee at Wilshire Pacific Bank. Practicing her diction while driving to work and denying herself yummy treats, Christine lives a miserable, goal-oriented life. The poor thing doesn't even dream that big, as we can tell by her deep sigh while she stares at the assistant manager's desk. It could be your name in there, Christine. Can you imagine such glory? Jim Jacks, the bank manager, hasn't made a decision yet. He says it's between Christine and Stu Rubin. At her surprise to see a new guy being considered for the promotion,
You mind picking one up for me? Thanks.
Jim explains the situation. Stu is a ruthless person, one could say almost evil, and that's just the stuff that a bank loves. Things are not looking good for our girl here, but at least she has a boyfriend. Dr. Clayton Dalton celebrates his first week as a psychology professor, having takeout at his desk. Birds of a feather, right? But don't worry, it gets worse. She has a gift for him, a rare coin she found at the bank. It's for his nerdy collection. On her way out, she can hear Clayton talking to his mother on the phone. It's painfully clear that Mr. and Mrs. Dalton disapprove of his romantic choices. She refers to Christine as the farm girl, even after he reminds her that they've been dating for almost a year now.
It's on making it through your first week.
Thank you very much.
His mother ignores that and goes on to tell him about Amy Kulik, a successful attorney, fresh out of Yale Law, who's looking for a tennis partner. Ain't that much better than Farm Girl? She gets back to the office, where her nasty rival complains about his meal. He swears he said no mayo. Did you hear him say no mayo? I didn't, but no one asked us, and it still goes down as extra proof of her low attention to detail. And that's not all Stu has in store for her. Later that day, casually asking Jim if he's a Laker fan, he offers him amazing seats because he just happens to have a spare pair of tickets. How random, right? That's when these very neat nails demand Christine's undivided attention. Mrs. Gainish is here for an extension on her mortgage. The bank is repossessing her property today, and it's been her home for 30 years. She had never missed a payment until she needed treatment for her eye. Taking pity on the old lady, Christine goes to her boss, highlighting the woman's payment history and recent medical problems.
Till the sickness took my eye.
Jim points out the huge profit the bank makes from foreclosures like that one. It does involve throwing a helpless grandma out of her home, of course, but that's precisely the kind of tough call that wouldn't be a problem for Stu. Obviously, looking at it as a teachable moment, Jim says he'll let her decide. From the other side of the assistant manager's desk, that nice empty chair whispers, "You need me, Christine. This is your chance." So she goes ahead and tells Mrs. Gainish the bank is taking her home today, and that is a final decision. Actually getting on her knees to beg for mercy, the woman makes such a scene that Christine calls security to throw her out. At the end of the day, Jim stops by her desk to say that she's at the top of the list for that promotion now. Stu is not very happy to hear that, especially considering the list only has 2 people.
You're at the top of the list.
In the parking lot, Christine gets scared to hear someone coughing and starts to walk faster. In a hurry to get in the car, she fails to see Mrs. Gainish in the back seat waiting for her. The old lady attacks her, and Christine uses all kinds of stationary items to fight back. When she gets literally kicked out of the car, Mrs. Gainish smashes the window with a heavy brick and pulls out a terrified Christine. Then, she does the weirdest thing so far. She takes a button from Christine's jacket and says a few words in a foreign language before giving it back. At night, Clayton tells her not to blame herself. That woman is clearly deranged, and they have nothing to do with that. But Christine is still disturbed. The swirling of the leaves in the wind sounds like an ominous whisper. She wants to have her fortune read, just to get some peace of mind. Clayton is a diehard skeptic and also fears to be seen at such a place by his students, but he'll do anything to shut her up. He'll do anything for her. So that's how we meet Ram Dass. He claims he can see the future, and for $60, he'll share a sneak peek with Christine. Ignoring the several rude remarks from Clayton, he takes her hand. After a few tense moments, he suddenly jumps out of his chair in horror.
What's wrong?
After asking if she's been blaspheming in a graveyard or messing with Ouija boards recently, Ram John offers them a refund because it's getting late and he's tired. She begs him to be honest, and then he says someone has cursed her. So much for that peace of mind. Still not convinced, Clayton leaves her home with her kitten. She has an hour until he comes back to pick her up, so she takes the opportunity to do some baking. A picture of her falls from the old cookbook, and it's from her farm days. Not a happy memory. Then she hears a noise. At first, it sounds like the floorboards upstairs, and then it's more like the gate hinges outside. When she gets closer to the window, a bunch of dead leaves come swarming towards her, and the lights go out. The shadows on the wall start to form a horned silhouette that comes right at her. She gets struck by the invisible attacker, and the lights go back on as she hits the floor. Of course, none of that is proof enough for Clayton, who wants to call the cops on Mrs. Gainish because it could only have been her.
Then who did this?
But as Christine insists there was nobody, he gets a doctor to see her. The doctor says it's all in her head, just a fabrication of a traumatized mind. Clayton is glad to see she's accepting the logical explanation. The least he could do is stay for the night. Christine has a horrid nightmare with Mrs. Gainish and wakes up in the morning totally terrified. As her car was trashed yesterday, Clayton drives her to work and says there's a rental car parked there for her trip back home. At the bank, Stu barely waits for her to sit down before coming to bother her with something about their loan procedures. She starts to explain it to him, but she stops talking when Mrs. Gainish's filthy nails make a surprise appearance, as if Stu's hand had somehow been replaced by that hideous thing. Realizing that Stu is undisturbed, she tries to keep going, but it's impossible to focus. She ends up losing it. Then her nose starts to bleed, and Jim offers a handkerchief. Christine starts to say she's got it under control, but opening her mouth was a mistake. Just like that, and totally out of the blue, she becomes a Tarantino movie victim. Except it all seems to be specifically aimed at her boss, Jim. When that tap seems to be finally done, Stu discreetly takes a folder from her desk while she leaves in panic. She goes straight to the only other address that Mrs. Gainish had registered at the bank. The woman who answers the door is her granddaughter, Ilenka. Christine begs her to see Mrs. Gainish because she can get her house back. Ilenka seems to know a lot about the whole thing, and she says that what Christine really wants is to be forgiven, and she probably thinks that can be achieved just by making it all right for the old lady. So Ilenka invites her in.
Come on.
Soon, Christine finds herself in the middle of a lively gathering. Family and friends are having a feast and speaking loudly in a foreign language. Then, she realizes what's going on. This is a funeral. And guess who died? Yep, the sweet grandma, Mrs. Gainish. And of course, Christine manages to fall right on top of the dead woman, which breaks the supporting table, making them swap positions as they fall. Everyone helps out until they're untangled. Ilenka makes sure to tell Christine that she deserves everything that is coming to her. But what is it that's coming to her? According to Ram Joss, it's the Lamia, the black goat. Christine remembers that was one of the words whispered to her button that day. The Lamia curse unfolds during a 3-day period of growing torment, and it ends by taking the person's soul. Taking it where exactly? Well, let's just say it's not heaven. A bit embarrassed at his lack of solutions, Ram Joss says her best shot now would be some kind of sacrifice, but there's no guarantee that the curse will be aborted. Christine protests that she's a vegetarian. Performing that sort of ritual is out of the question. He gives her a manual anyway, just in case. She goes back home, and it doesn't take long for that horned fella to show up again with growling noises, and then creeping up the stairs after her. Locking the bedroom door is clearly useless, just like trying to use the phone. When she goes for the window, Lamia boy's right outside too. Christine is lifted up in the air and yanked from side to side while the room is totally trashed. And then she's violently dropped. That's the kind of thing that changes a person, and that little kitten is about to learn that the hard way. Clayton arrives when the poor thing is being buried in the yard.
What are you doing out here?
She says the red stains on her sleeve are just tomato juice, and then she tells him that everything will be all right now. Famous last words, right? It sure seems like she believes it though. In a beautiful summer dress and carrying that lousy looking cake, she bravely marches to the Daltons. Just a perfect time to meet her in-laws, Trudy and Leonard. Not to mention their cat Heckaba, who greets her with a hiss. Clayton finds it strange when Christine says she used to have a cat. He asks if something happened to her adorable pet, but she just changes the subject. At the dinner table, it's Clayton's turn to try and change the topic when Christine's parents are mentioned, but it doesn't work. So she tells them the truth. Since her father passed away a few years ago, she hasn't spoken to her mother, who is an alcoholic. Trudy reacts to that in a surprising way. Her own father had a drinking problem, and she now regrets her attempts to hide it for so long. Christine's honesty is refreshing, and she has nothing to be ashamed of. So that works like a positive shift in the atmosphere, and everyone seems more friendly and relaxed. They're even trying the lame harvest cake for dessert, but that's only until her own slice begins to move, and then it blinks at her. She tries to stab it, but the thing inside the cake sucks in the whole fork. There's a pair of hooves under the door when someone begins to pound on it heavily, and all the while, everyone is still talking cheerfully as if nothing is going on. And then there's a deafening sound that no one else can hear, and that keeps blasting until she can't take it anymore. She throws a glass at the door and starts screaming, "Leave me alone." Once it's all over, Trudy says she should leave. She also tells Clayton not to follow her, as she is clearly a handful, and he doesn't need that right now. Now, Christine has only one place to go, Ram Joss's shop. After she's done lashing out, he politely reminds her that he did say there are no guarantees with this sort of business. But he does have some good news. There's someone who can help her contact the demon. That'll cost her $10,000 in cash by tomorrow. Ram Joss also reminds her that tomorrow is the third day, which means the last one in Lamia terms. Next day, Christine goes for a bold move. She makes up a medical problem in her family and asks Jim for an advance. He tells her that her biggest loan is now off. He has just learned that they closed the deal somewhere else, and that doesn't look good for her. That promotion is officially delayed for now, but chances are that Stu will be assistant manager very soon. All Jim has to offer concerning her family issues is the day off. She takes it and goes straight home. Gathering all your stuff that could be sold would be a hard task anyway, but it gets much harder when a demon keeps popping out of the cabinets to attack you. Once it's all packed in a few suitcases, she takes it to a pawnbroker who offers her less than $4,000 for everything. Take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it.
So there is Christine having a huge bowl of ice cream while she cries. That's when Clayton has the nerve to show up after his mama's boy behavior last night. What could he possibly offer to win her trust back? I'll tell you what, $10,000, that's what. Despite his own belief, it has become obvious that she believes the curse, and he'll never be able to sweep that under a rug. He has already paid Ram Joss. He drives her to the house. We've seen it before and we know who lives there, Dina. She tells them all about Juan and says she still wants payback for that. Tonight is her chance. She warns Christine that she must be strong. In a candlelit room, the ritual begins. An assistant brings a goat and chains it to the round table. Dina starts to summon the Lamia, and those familiar noises begin. When she gets the demon to possess her, Christine puts her hand on the animal, transferring the spirit as planned. But when the assistant comes with the knife, he gets bitten by the goat. Now, Lamia is inside him and ready to attack, but as soon as Dina comes to, she successfully banishes the troll. Sadly, all this emotion is too much for her heart, and she doesn't make it. Outside her house, Christine is sad for her, but happy that it's all over. But Ram Joss has terrible news for her. Dina was able to kick Lamia out of that boy, but that was it. The goat is still alive, and the curse is still on. So he tells her about the only option she has left, something he hasn't mentioned before, because he hoped it wouldn't come to this. The Lamia is coming tomorrow to take the soul of the person who owns the button.
Lamia cannot be banished by a medium.
If she gives it to someone else, she's off the hook. On their way back, she tells Clayton that it's all over now. Tomorrow, they'll meet at the train station and go on a trip to Santa Barbara to relax and put all of this behind them. There's a brief moment of panic when she thinks the envelope is lost, but she quickly gets it together and keeps smiling until he drives off. Then, she goes to a diner and makes a call. 10 minutes later, Stu gets there. He's begging her not to tell Jim about the file he took and how he sabotaged that huge deal. She tells him that she wants to give him something, but he's in tears now and she can't bring herself to do that to him. That's when a familiar face in the obituary section gives her a wild idea. A quick visit to Ram Joss confirms that a dead person would totally count as the new owner. She could leave it by the tombstone and declare it as a gift out loud. But Christine is not cutting corners on this now. She goes to Mrs. Ganush's grave, digs her up, shoves the envelope into her mouth, and then declares her as the new owner. In the morning, everything seems different. Jim leaves her a message saying they found out about Stu, so she can consider herself a new assistant manager as of Monday. And she doesn't know yet, but Clayton is planning to propose over the weekend. Life is good again for Christine, for a few moments, because the ring is not the only surprise Clayton has for her. He has the envelope she dropped in the car last night. She must have taken that stupid rare coin by mistake. At the sight of the abominable button, Christine Christine gets so shocked, she falls right on the tracks when the train is coming. But even before it gets to her, something else does. The tracks melt into hellish fire, and flames surround her before the earth finally swallows Christine Brown. And this is the end. This was a recap of the 2009 movie Drag Me to Hell by Ghost House Pictures, starring Allison Lahman and Justin Long. So what do you think? Was there really a way out of this curse? What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below using #CinemaRecap. Until next time.